Welcome to The World Awaits.
Travel tales to inspire your wanderlust.
I'm Kirsty Bedford, journalist, editor and travel writer.
And I'm Belinda Jackson, author, travel journalist and columnist, and we're your weekly co-hosts.
Hello and welcome back. How are you this week, Kirsty?
I'm great, thanks, Belle. I went to Apollo Bay for the weekend and we walked through the Great Otway National Park. Oh my gosh, it is just so beautiful in there. Fun fact, the forest is full of Californian redwoods that were planted in 1936. Talk about taking nature immersion to a whole new level when you're surrounded by nothing but the world's tallest trees.
Oh, I've seen your photos of the redwood forest on Instagram. That's Kirsty's Rights if you fancy checking them out. And I now have it on my to-do list. I'm still recovering from being up in far north Queensland at Port Douglas, which is an hour north of Cairns, for the Taste Port Douglas Food Festival. It's now in its 7th year, and after all the long lunches, I'm still full.
Gotta love a good food festival.
Yes.
Not only for the food, though, but you also get a chance to see some of the best names in the business at the masterclasses, and they always have such amazing long lunches. I've been to a few good food festivals, some really unique ones as well, like the Bluff Oyster Food Festival. Bluff, for those who don't know, is the southernmost town on mainland New Zealand, and as well as loads of oysters, which admittedly I actually don't really love. You get some pretty quintessential Kiwi food, though, like whitebait and paua. And being so far down south, you get a really authentic experience too. So great small town vibe, genuine Kiwi hospitality. What were some of the highlights for you at Taste Port Douglas, Belle?
Well, there were some pretty big names there, including iconic Melbourne chef Guy Grossi, a stalwart on the scene, and who's just opened his new restaurant, Puttanesca, in Kew Junction. Also, Ian Curley, who heads up the food at some of the Overlow hotels, including Amphlett House, which I ate at in Melbourne recently. He's also at Ridges, Melbourne. And Michael Lambie, who's ex-Stokehouse and now of Lucy Lou's. I have to say, his lamb shoulder in Penang curry was one of the absolute standouts of all the food I ate, and also Vietnamese specialist Jerry May from Pho Nom, who did an amazing open-air class with Matt Preston. But there were some great local stories too, such as Wolf Lane Gin from Cairns. Their tropical gin was the first to bring notes of mango into the gins, and it actually works. And the barista coffee liqueur is the absolute bomb.
I love the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival. And not just for the big names too, but they have a really good regional guide which introduces you to some of the best chefs in the regions around Victoria, usually with locally sourced fresh seasonal produce. And there are events in like vineyards and orchards and festivals and gold rush towns with loads of local wines.
Bliss. Yeah, during the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival, which runs in sort of March each year, this year I went to an incredible Indigenous food dinner at Australia's top restaurant, Attica. And, you've also got Tasting Australia in Adelaide, which runs around April to May, and that taps into South Australia's awesome wine scene, which includes the Barossa and Clare Valley and the Fleurieu Peninsula.
There's also the Noosa Eat and Drink Festival held in June, and the Grampians Grape Escape in Halls Gap in Western Victoria each May, and Taste of Kakadu each May.
Awesome.
And yes, yeah. And also Tassie actually holds a food-heavy Huon Valley Midwinter Festival in the middle of winter, and lots of cider, obviously. Yeah. And I've also got the Curated Plate in Queensland Sunshine Coast on my list too.
Oh, look, don't forget the weird ones. I had a bit of a scout around for these Bacon Fest in Kingaroy in southern Queensland.
My son would love that one.
And I was like, yeah, Bacon Fest, get in it. And I've also had the Minion Garlic Festival in Gippsland in Victoria on my list for years. Because the garlic from there is absolutely spectacular. I still haven't been, but it's supposed to be just the absolute bomb for garlic fiends.
Oh my gosh, imagine how you'd smell
yeah,
coming
don't go
out
there.
of that one. I'm going to add another New Zealand one to this too. I have to put a special call out to the Hokitika Wildfoods Festival in New Zealand, famous for its, challenging foods.
Hokitika, I pitched it as, I haven't been, but I pitched it as a story to an editor a few years ago, highlighting the fact that the dish for that year was something like sheep's intestines cooked in a ground oven, forgetting that the editor was actually heavily pregnant, and she declined my pitch, so I've never been.
So good. So who are you chatting to anyway this week, Belle?
Well, to balance all of that food talk, we're going walking. So I caught up with authors Evie O and Andrew Groon, whose new book, Trip Melbourne, has just been published by Thames and Hudson. Welcome to the show, Evie and Andrew. It's great to have you on The World Awaits.
Thanks for having us.
Now,
Thank you, Belinda.
It's so great to have you here. You're both in Sydney at the moment, but your new book is Day Trip Melbourne, which details, which is a walking guide to 52 walks around Melbourne City. So, can you just tell me why? Now, you're both Sydney-siders. Why did you decide that you would write a writing guide about Melbourne?
Well, I mean, it's an easy decision for us. We want to see more of the world, and Day Trip Sydney, our first title, second one is Dog Trip Sydney, kind of started during COVID, and a bit of a backstory. Andrew and I met on Tinder just 3 months before the pandemic, and then so the dating options have kind of disappeared. There were no restaurants to dine on, and no pubs, nothing. So we started going on road trips, and that was kind of the start of it. And like the two books in the series, Day Trip and Dog Trip Sydney, were quite successful, and Thames and Hudson were like, do you want to do other cities? And it was a really easy choice for me and Andrew, because we haven't lived in Melbourne, always love Melbourne, have a lot of friends in Melbourne. And I mean, why not? Like, the whole vision for Day Trip is so we can see more of the world.
Yeah, it's like it's the best job in the world. And after we did our first book, we were like, okay, now we have to do one book a year for the rest of our lives. And why not do Melbourne next? Makes sense.
Have you really set that ambition, a book a year?
Yes.
I mean, it's a loose ambition, right?
Well, I mean, we're doing it. But yeah, I think it's possible. I think it would be amazing.
I mean, to dive deep into kind of like my existential fear is that, like, I'm 37 now, and I thought, like, how many more years can I walk the earth? And then you kind of like freak out, right? How many more places can you go? And that's where the one book a year came from for an inner fear of mine.
That's an incredible ambition. So the first book was Day Trip Sydney, and then Dog Trip Sydney, and now I also hear that Dog Trip Melbourne is waiting in the wings, isn't it?
Yes, it's top secret, but I guess
sorry.
the dog is
No,
the dog is out of the kennel. But yeah, Dog Trip Melbourne will be out at the end of the year, and we were in Melbourne for 3 months last year, where we did about 100 walks for both the books in about 100 days. It was pretty grueling.
Well, it would be grueling. I mean, some of the walks, let's take a look at one of the classics, because they are short walks. There's 52 short walks in the new Melbourne book. So a classic would be Brighton Beach to St Kilda Pier. So it's just under 6 kilometres one way, and it takes 2 hours, and you've graded each of the walks as well, and that one's graded easy. So they're not all, and they are day walks, I think people have got to remember. They're not all grueling, like eating dead fish and drinking harvested rainwater or anything like that. We are talking about short walks, aren't they? So, I mean, there's a couple in there that I think are real Melbourne classics, and you've done a good balance between city walks, such as that one, in Brighton Beach and around the Tan, and then you go to within 130 kilometres of the city. So I really like, the Cement Creek Redwood Forest is in East Warburton. It's such a classic. And then on the other side of town, there's 7 kilometres up to Flinders Peak and the You Yanks. What are your favourites from the Melbourne book?
Can we actually go back to that point where you said, like, they're not grueling? Because we actually don't do grueling trips. Like, we wouldn't like full on hikers or bushwalkers. I only climbed my first 3 when I was 27, and we're not super fit or anything. And that's kind of the point of day trip. I mean, come on, who joined the gym yesterday? But that's kind of the premise of Day Trip as well, because when we tried to look into the adventures we wanted to go, and we buy books and all that, a lot of them were kind of addressed to quite serious hikers, and we are not like that. And for every trip that we do, we always make sure there's a bit of a reward, like whether it's a waterfall or a beautiful scene up the hill, and it's never too hard, I think. Do you have anything to add on that, Andrew?
Yeah, and we also, well, what you were saying, we're regular people, but we also wanted to make kind of it very accessible for all types of people. For example, we have a lot of walks which are suitable for prams. Some walks are suitable for dogs. Other walks are kind of more engaging for someone who's up for a bit more of an adventure, where you have to cross a river without a bridge. And we just want to give everyone kind of an easy choice for their abilities.
Right. So then, do you have? What are your favourites out of the Melbourne book? Are there any that you'll find yourself keep going back to?
Well, mine is the one I was just referring to, which is Jeb's Pool in Cumberland Falls, and that's in the Great Otway National Park, just off the Great Ocean Road, and it's a fairly wild trek. You can't do it if the water level is high, because you actually have to cross the river, and it's fun. You get
three times.
Yeah, you have to cross it 3 times. You have to kind of hump a dead log to get over over the river, and it's just incredibly beautiful and wild. And also the drive there along the Great Ocean Road, like the journey to get there is spectacular as well.
Absolutely. And Evie, what about yours? Where would that be your top walk, or do you have something in a different part of the city?
It would be one of my top walks, but I think it's very hard for me to choose one, because what we realize with the day trips from Melbourne are like, within 2 hours of drive, you actually can get very different topography. Like you can get to the Alps and see snow. You can go south, and then suddenly you're encapsulated in lush forest. You can go to an island. You can go far to Venus Bay. I can't choose a favorite, but if I have to choose 2 favorites, it will probably be Hanging Rock. I'm a bit of a rock girl, like as in, I love rocks, and the rock formation there are just kind of unique, and I've never seen something like that before. But also Mushroom Rock out in the west, in the east, is also kind of crazy. And actually, the Organ Pipe National Park shows really interesting rock formations because of volcanic activities. Sorry, that were 3, that are 3, not 1.
That's okay. I can understand that. I mean, they're all incredible formations, and at such different levels from Melbourne as well. I mean, Organ Pipe's just on the edge of the city, which I find is always quite amazing. Now, there is a third author in this partnership, and that's Henry, who's your whippet, who you describe as a living piece of Velcro, which is kind of interesting. So tell me, has Henry done a lot of these walks with you?
No, I just said he's got 2 books authored under him, so he did come to a lot of them. Sorry, Andrew, you take that one.
Basically, if the walk is dog friendly, Henry's coming along. There's no question about it.
So he's that's you've dedicated an entire book that's Dog Trip Sydney to his adventures, and he's on the cover of it looking like he's running through a tropical paradise, So is there anything that in that Day Trips Melbourne, let's stay with the new book, when he walks with you, because a lot of this goes through national parks, is that what inspired you to then do a separate volume about dog walks?
Exactly. So when we were doing the first book, Day Trip Sydney, he kind of knows when we're about to go on a bushwalk, and he gets very upset when he's not coming, because obviously we have the backpacks, I'm holding my camera, and so we felt very guilty not bringing him to the national park. So it just kind of made sense for us to kind of make a book that other dog owners could have, because we also found there wasn't much literature or kind of accessible information that showed really amazing and epic dog-friendly walks.
I think what Andrew's saying is like we're actually crazy dog people, and we know there are more of us out there, so we're catering to the request.
So, as another crazy dog person, the dog trips in Sydney, it's got a mix of pure inner city walks, and then you go much further afield. Is there a chance for dogs to go off lead in any of these walks that you've planned?
Yeah, there are actually. So on the contents page that comes with every book, there's on the dog ones there are categories that says on and off and on. I have to say in Melbourne there are probably more on leash ones because a lot of them are more regulated, but we have found some good ones that are off leash.
Where would you recommend? Where should I go with my dogs? That's basically what I'm asking. It's all about me.
I think that has to be a second podcast because the book is not out yet.
Okay, all right then. And when is it coming out, by the way?
It's coming out in November.
Oh, okay, just in time for Christmas. That's fantastic. Yeah. So is it going to have, Melbourne has 52 short walks. Are you going to keep that level for all of them? You've got 52 for each of them. So that's basically a walk for each week of the year. Is that going to be your modus operandi as you go through? As in for every book that you publish for the rest of your walking days?
For better or for worse, it seems so.
You've created this template.
Yes, we have.
We've developed the template with our own publisher, actually. Initially, we kind of wanted to include more culture, like, where cafes and all that. But in a way, we're grateful that we can just focus on finding natures. The number 52 might change if the book format changes. Maybe when we do overseas, we might not have the opportunity to do 52. Like, not every country is like Australia, where we're so lucky that we live surrounded by nature in such short access. So, yeah, so that's the Australian format at least. And New Zealand, maybe.
So, do you? You're looking in Australia and further afield. Can you give us a little hint about where you are going to be venturing next? Because this sounds like an incredible partnership that you've developed, and the format that you've developed. Are you going to be staying within Australia? Are you disappearing overseas?
Our next book, which we're starting later this year, will be in a southern island south of the mainland.
Okay, we won't give away any commercial confidentialities on it as well, but it's incredible that you've developed this long-term plan. So I'm just going to ask you for a couple of more recommendations from your current books. The Day Trips in Sydney, which does some beautiful things. Obviously you've got some rock, you're a bit of a rock aficionado because you've got the gorgeous wedding rock in the Royal National Park in Sydney. Give us your top Sydney walk and your top Sydney with dog walks, just to match your Melbourne ones.
I think my top human walk in Sydney would be Clover Hill Trail, and that's in I think Macquarie Pass National Park, is it?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, and basically there's not really a set out trail. You just kind of have to follow the river, and it's a very steep riverbank, but along the way there are just 3 incredible waterfalls, and the very last waterfall has this amazing swimming hole, and on the way there it's super difficult, and there's all these vines you have to grab on and kind of not swing across but use them, and it's just a real adventure. Yeah.
But if Effie can do it, anyone else can do it. That's what I would say.
So the final question, is the one that we ask everybody on the podcast, which is, tell me, Andrew, your most bizarre travel experience.
Well, it's pretty bizarre. When I was younger, I was living and teaching English in Japan, and I was very broke, and a teacher was sick at another school, and so I filled in for that teacher. And when I got there, it was a school for artists and musicians, and they asked me to teach them the dance moves and the lyrics to an English song, which I didn't know. I offered the Macarena, and after freaking out for a while, they said, okay, you don't have to do that. You can perform this play in front of this class of professional actors, might I add. And so they gave me the play, and it was a Western, and it had about 8 characters, and I had to do 8 different cowboy voices, and I was up there dying inside for about 45 minutes. And after that, I earned, about $45.
I love it. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, and thank you for joining us on The World Awaits.
That was Evie O and Andrew Groon talking about their new book of day walks, Day Trip Melbourne. You can also find their earlier books, Day Trip Sydney and Dog Trip Sydney, in bookshops now, or you can check the show notes on our website, theworldawaits.au, for their titles.
And onto our tip this week, we're talking fashion in travel. And I have to say that most of this advice comes from our own fashion faux pas. So we're going to take a very personal, not research-based approach to this one, sharing our decades of travel experience with you so you don't have to repeat our mistakes.
Yes, we're talking top-line advice here, like, what do you pack for a cruise? I had no idea when I went on my first cruise. And it can be really daunting, like, how formal do you go? Do you wear resort wear or jeans? And then what about excursions? So when I went on my cruise, the advice was pack it all. So some restaurants do require you to dress as you would on sort of a bit of a formal night out. So you need a nice shirt or a nice dress. And then during the day, it can be very casual. So people are obviously in bathers by the pool, pending the weather, not when I was crossing the Bass Strait. And you also need to consider what you'll need for excursion. So I made a mistake here, and we walked around Dove Lake at Cradle Mountain, and I did not have a lightweight great top jumper to wear, so it was pretty cold, I have to say. And also, don't forget your runners, because obviously, or walking boots, because if you're going to be going on excursions, you know the last thing you want to do is be going out in heels.
Yeah, absolutely. And, some of those, there's always those special occasion nights too where they have pyjama parties or something like that. So if you tend not to wear pyjamas, you do have to plan. You have to plan for that one. Because you can get caught out. So taking it off the cruise ship.
The visuals.
Sorry about that. I have a whole new meaning to the night. We're going to go off cruise ships now and go onto the ski fields. And this is my advice is, do not buy white ski gear. When you crash and burn, they'll never find you in the snow. And yes, I own a white ski jacket. I thought it looked really cute, and it had little diamantes on it.
So you, Belle.
I know. It was awesome for the après ski. But the first time I wore it, my ski bunny friend actually burst into laughter when she was like, "That's it, we're never going to find you again."
Also, another one, when you're on wildlife safaris, don't wear a red puffer. Because you're obviously trying to blend in and hide from the animals, and you don't want to stick out. And even though, red, you're sort of attracting animals to come towards you.
Oh my God. I've got to admit this one too. I took my red puffer to Chile and Patagonia when we were trying to stalk pumas. I tell you, they avoided us for 3 days. And on the 4th desperate day, when I thought the story I was commissioned to write would never, ever happen, we saw six pumas. It was incredible. But when my guide saw my red jacket on the first day, It was my warmest jacket. We're in Patagonia. It was midwinter, but his eyes rolled so far back, I'm sure he saw his own brain. Oh, God. So, mind you, I've got to say, I was issued a vivid red jacket by the ship when I went to Antarctica years ago, presumably so that they could find you if you were left behind on the ice. So my hot tip for this one is pack more than an hour before your flight or you'll be like me. I did actually go to Darwin last month without packing any underwear. So.
I have actually gone to Fiji and forgot bathers.
And thongs, you told me you didn't even have thongs.
No, I didn't have thongs. I wasn't going to admit to that as well.
Sorry.
But I did pack in a real hurry. I was on deadline and I literally did also leave pack until the night before. And yeah, I don't think my fellow travellers would have been very happy if I went skinny dipping. So I didn't go swimming on that first excursion until I could find somewhere where I could actually get some bathers. But I actually also recently went on a heli flight on a mountaintop, and what I thought were pretty safe white sneakers, but I had no socks on. And so I took some video and, because when we hopped out, I didn't realise that our feet literally were just sunk completely in the snow because it was so soft. So maybe consider sort of appropriate for where if you're doing things like heli flying to the top of a mountain in Queenstown.
I think there's actually photographic evidence of this one on your Instagram reels, isn't there?
Yeah.
And if you want to check that out again, people, her Instagram is Kirsty, Kirstie, Writes, Writes. So check it out. Carolyn Schonafinger visited Switzerland in 1988 as a travel agent and was instantly smitten. She's now a certified Swiss travel expert and talks to Kirsty about how Switzerland is leading the way in slow travel and some things that might surprise you about this spectacular mountainous country.
Welcome to the show, Caroline.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here and chat to you today, Kirsty.
So great to have you. Let's start by just tell us a bit about how you got into travel and in particular your focus on Switzerland.
Well, my first job out of school actually was as a travel agent. I had been doing some work experience at the local travel agency, and that included lots of those fun jobs like, putting stamps on brochures back in the day. And I was offered a full-time job there, so I jumped at that. And I then, as part of my work as a travel agent, got to visit some fantastic places. And one of those was Switzerland. In 1988, I travelled to a few countries in Europe on a Hokitika tour, but it was Switzerland that I fell in love with it straight away. Later on, as the years went by, I was married, had a couple of kids, and then I wanted to get back into the workforce, but I wanted to work from home. So I started a website which was focused on holidays to Europe, which is still there today, but not that active, if I'm honest. But I did notice that the Switzerland articles that I'd written were the most popular, and they were the ones that all the majority of the traffic was coming to. So in 2019, I decided to start a niche website about travelling to Switzerland. And that's what I do today. Holidays to Switzerland is the website, and also started a podcast in 2020, that lovely year of COVID when no one could travel. So it seemed like a good idea to start a podcast to talk about travelling to Switzerland when we finally could again.
So what do you think it is about Switzerland that appeals so much to Australians?
Well, I think it's probably the scenery, it's so different to what we have here in Australia with our beautiful beaches and even the deserts. There's the mountains, the lakes, glaciers, waterfalls, everything, or everywhere you look, it's just like a postcard. And I think that's what really appeals to Australians.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also been a long leader in sustainability. Why do you think it's been a leader, and how has it been sort of a leader in that respect?
I think probably going back to that natural beauty again. I mean, the Swiss obviously realise that they've got something really special there, and so they've always been really keen to preserve that and to protect it for future generations. unlike us here in Australia, they don't have any natural resources like iron ore or coal or whatever, but they have got lots and lots of water. So they do use that really well for hydro energy particularly. But not only that, there's lots of other sustainable methods that they use for power as well. So, for instance, the Ration Railways, which is the fleet that includes the famous Bernina Express train, it's 100% powered by hydro energy. But there's also different sources as well. There's a cable car called the Stanzerhorn, which is fully solar powered. And then there's even a funicular in Freiburg, which is powered by filtered wastewater.
Amazing.
Now, I haven't actually been there, but I am guaranteed that you can't smell the wastewater. But it's a great, like, how innovative is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And what are sort of some of the other things, I mean, talking about slow travel too, because obviously mentioning the trains, that slow travel is just becoming so increasingly popular too. Are you finding that Australians wanting to go to Switzerland are particularly interested in that slow travel, train travel?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And look, Switzerland, it might be a fairly small country, but it's actually got the densest network of public transport in the world. And not only that, it all just connects so seamlessly. So you can be taking a train from city to city, and then you need to catch a bus. Well, the train will stop, and there's a bus waiting to leave 5 minutes later. And similarly, like if you're in somewhere maybe not quite so remote, but you want to go to see a lake, if you can't get there by train, you can get there by bus, and then the boat will be waiting when the bus or the train arrives. So yeah, it's also seamless, and even the if you're going up to the mountains, the cable cars, the funiculars, everything is just the timetables just integrate so perfectly. It's fantastic.
What are some of the places that that Australians just should put on the top of their travel to-do list when they're going to Switzerland? I mean, we've all obviously seen those spectacular images of the mountains and the lakes, but what are some of the places maybe that are lesser known and that aren't so populated that people should consider travelling to?
Yeah, one of the things that I always say to people is, sure, you want to tick those big name places, off your bucket list or whatever you want to call it, like Lucerne and the Jungfrau region and even say Zermatt, because we've all seen, as you said, those amazing images, and they're all really beautiful, so it's no wonder that they're popular. But I think it's a good idea to go to some of those smaller villages, perhaps even 15-20 minutes away from those popular places, to really get a look of the non-touristy side of things. Another really nice place to visit is the Appenzell region, which is in the east of Switzerland, and it's really traditionally sort of farming country. There's not the huge mountains that you'll find in other parts of Switzerland, but there's certainly a couple of fairly high mountains, but it's all rolling, lush green pastures and plenty of cows. It's a great area for cheese making and chocolate making, and a lot of festivals there where the locals love to dress up in their traditional costumes and play the Alp horn, and it's really like Switzerland of yesteryear, but it's so great.
And having been going back every year, what do you think are some things about Switzerland that might surprise Australians?
Wow, what surprises? Well, everything is just so clean, I speak to a lot of people, and that's one thing that really stands out. They're just so, I don't know, it's going back to that natural beauty, I think, and maybe it's not something that they think about consciously, but yeah, everywhere is just so clean, and they're really appreciative of the beauty that they live in. I think another thing too that's perhaps it's surprising for Australians is that if you go anywhere on a weekend, you'll just see the Swiss out in droves hiking. They love hiking. It's like the national pastime. So you'll see families, you'll see, generations. There'll be the grandparents, their children, and then their children, and the dog. They're all out for a walk. That's just what you do on a weekend in Switzerland. It's fantastic.
Sounds like my kind of holiday.
Yeah.
So when you go back next, when are you going back next, this year or next year?
Well, I've just been there for a month this year, spent all of June there. So whilst I'd like to go back again this year, it probably won't be until next year now.
So what were some of the places that you went and some of the things that you did that were a bit unique while you were there?
We did, this time we went to quite a few places that we hadn't been to before, or we'd only sort of been to for a day. So we're trying to get more back into that slow travel, spending more time in places rather than just ticking places off to say that we've been there. So we spent a bit of time in Graubünden, which is the canton in the east of Switzerland, and visited some beautiful little villages there that there weren't too many tourists around, so that was great. Another thing we did, which is, I wouldn't definitely say it's off the beaten track, but we visited Mount Pilatus, which is near Lucerne, but we decided to stay the night on the mountain, and that was just amazing. The sunset and then the sunrise the next day was definitely one of the highlights of our trip. It was wonderful. And then there's little places like we visited the village of Quinton, which you can only reach by foot or by boat. It's located on Lake Valen, which again is sort of in the east of Switzerland. And it's quite unique that we took a boat across the lake, which took about half an hour. And then you're at this little village, not many people around, but surprisingly there's a couple of restaurants there. There's quite a few houses because people do live there. But knowing that we could only get back to where we came from by foot or by boat was a really nice experience.
Yeah, amazing. And they say, and I always believe that, it's the people that also really make a place. So you must have had some incredible local encounters during all of your visits back. What are some of the local sort of encounters that you've had while you've been there that have made it such a special trip?
Look, there's been a lot, of course. Staying on a farm, so on an actual working farm in a little cottage was quite amazing. Look out the kitchen window when you're getting breakfast, and there's a cow just putting his or her head over the fence, and the bells ringing, and you think, wow, this is the real Switzerland. There's so many things like that. People that you meet when you're out hiking, they're always fascinated to have a chat, and can't believe that we've travelled so far from, they always say, isn't it 24 hours by plane? Like, how do you do that? So that's always interesting. And often when you're going on those hikes, or you're out and about, you'll see the little farm stalls where the farmer has a little stand out at the front gate where he's selling the yogurt that he's made from the milk that he got from his cow yesterday, sort of thing, or cheese. So that's always a really nice experience to actually taste the produce from the farm where you're standing in front of.
Incredible. Do you think you'll eventually move there?
Well, I'd love to, but I don't think I will. We've just welcomed our first grandchild, so there's kind of a bit of a pull to stay in Australia now. But certainly, in the future, I'd like to go and spend maybe 3 or 6 months there at a time. For now, I'll just put up with going once or twice a year, which I certainly can't complain about.
No, and it's certainly enough to be in your position where you're well educating people who are really interested in going. So we will put all of that information in the show notes of people that want to go to Switzerland, because I'm sure all of your expert advice would be well appreciated. We end every interview with this question, so I'm going to ask you this last question. What's the most bizarre thing that's happened on your travels?
Well, this was on my very first trip to Europe back in 1988, and we'd actually been staying with my husband has an aunt who lives in Bern in Switzerland. We'd been staying with her, and we were heading down to Athens to finish off our trip. So we were, doing the old backpacker on a budget trip, and so we went and booked a train from Bern, went to Munich, and then all the way down to Athens, which was over 48 hours. I would never do that today, but when you're on a budget, you do these things. So luckily for us, the auntie had packed us a couple of sandwiches and a couple of apples, because we got on the train, and it was a real education for two pretty naive young Australians. We were in a compartment with three beds on each side, so like a triple bunk, and the train travelled through Yugoslavia, which it was then, on its way to Athens. But after about the first evening, I think we left at night, and we'd sort of eaten our apples and our sandwiches, so we thought, well, we'll go down to the restaurant, the cafe buffet cart to get some food. And as we were looking at the food, we saw a couple of cats in the food display cabinet, and they weren't very nice looking cats. So we decided that we weren't going to purchase any of that food. We had to make do with what we had for the rest of the trip.
Yeah. Oh gosh, the things you see on your travels, right?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. All right. Well, look, thank you. It's fantastic talking to you, and I hope that you have some, great new adventures in your next trips to Switzerland. You can hear more about Switzerland at Caroline's website, holidaystoswitzerland.com, where you'll also find information about where to listen to her podcast, Holidays to Switzerland Travel Podcast.
And that brings to a close The World Awaits this week. Click to subscribe anywhere you listen to your favourite pods, and you can find us at theworldawaits.au. And where can people find you, Kirsty?
I'm at Kirsty Writes on Instagram and Facebook. That's Kirstie Writes. And where can people find you, Belle?
You'll find me at globalsalsa.com or Instagram on global_salsa. Thanks for listening. See you next week.